What if I told you that for 25 years, a princess lived in complete darkness, never seeing another human face, never feeling sunlight on her skin, never hearing her own name spoken aloud? Imagine being born into royalty, only to discover that your very existence was considered so dangerous, so threatening to the crown, that your own family would rather you disappear forever than risk letting you live freely. Today, we're uncovering the heartbreaking, unbelievable, and sometimes truly horrifying story of why this princess was locked in a tower for 25 years. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the dark reality of what happened when royal bloodlines, political paranoia, and family betrayal collided in the most brutal way imaginable. By the time you hear the full truth, you'll understand why some secrets were meant to stay buried in the shadows of history. Throughout medieval Europe, royal families faced a constant dilemma: how to maintain power while dealing with inconvenient relatives who might threaten their rule. But what happened to Princess Eleanor of Brittany went far beyond typical royal imprisonment. This is the story of a woman whose only crime was being born with a legitimate claim to the English throne, and how that single fact condemned her to a living death that lasted a quarter of a century. When her father Geoffrey died in 1186, Eleanor was just 2 years old. But already, the seeds of her destruction were being planted. Her brother Arthur of Brittany was recognized as the heir to their father's lands. But Eleanor, as Geoffrey's daughter, possessed an equally valid claim that made powerful nobles nervous. King John made a calculation that would doom his niece to decades of suffering. Rather than risk Eleanor becoming a rallying point for his enemies, rather than chance her marrying a powerful lord who might use her claim to challenge his rule, John decided on a solution that was both elegant and monstrous. He would make her disappear without actually killing her. Eleanor was taken to Corfe Castle in Dorset, one of the most impregnable fortresses in England. But she wasn't placed in comfortable quarters befitting a princess. Instead, she was locked in a circular tower room, roughly 15 feet in diameter, with walls so thick that no sound from outside could penetrate. The room had no windows, only narrow arrow slits that let in mere slivers of light during the day. There was no furniture except a straw mattress, a wooden bucket, and a small table. The door was solid oak, reinforced with iron bands, and it had no handle on the inside. Once it closed behind her, Eleanor was sealed in what would become her tomb for the living. But here's where the horror truly begins. King John's orders were specific and cruel. Eleanor was to be kept alive, but she was to have no contact with the outside world. No visitors, no letters, no news. The guards who brought her food twice a day were forbidden from speaking to her or even looking directly at her face. She was to become a ghost, a forgotten princess who existed but didn't exist. For the first year, Eleanor likely held on to hope. She was young, she was royal. Surely someone would rescue her or ransom her. But as months turned to years, that hope must have slowly died. The silence was perhaps the most torturous part. Imagine speaking to yourself for years. Your own voice, the only human sound you ever hear. The physical conditions were deliberately harsh. In winter, the stone tower became an icebox with no fireplace or brazier for warmth. Eleanor had only thin blankets and her own body heat to survive the brutal English winters. In summer, the airless chamber became stifling, with no ventilation except those tiny arrow slits. Her meals were basic gruel, stale bread, and water. Enough to keep her alive, but not enough to maintain her health. Over the years, her teeth likely rotted, her hair fell out in patches, and her skin became pale and sickly from lack of sunlight. The once beautiful princess was slowly being erased, piece by piece. But the physical torment was nothing compared to the mental anguish. Eleanor had been trained from birth to be a political leader, to manage estates, to negotiate marriages and alliances. Her mind was sharp and active, and now it had nothing to focus on but the stone walls around her. Historical accounts suggest that by her 5th year of imprisonment, Eleanor had begun talking to imaginary companions. By her 10th year, She was observed through the door slot, rocking back and forth for hours, humming the same tune repeatedly. The guards reported that sometimes she would stand at the arrow slits and scream until her voice gave out, though the thick walls ensured no one outside could hear her. The cruelest part? Eleanor knew exactly why she was there. She understood that her royal blood, once a blessing, had become her curse. She knew that every day she remained alive, she remained a threat to King John's rule. And she knew that her imprisonment would only end with her death. Eleanor's imprisonment lasted through the reign of King John and continued under his son, Henry III. Different kings, but the same cold calculation. Eleanor alive but hidden was safer than Eleanor dead and potentially martyred. She became a state secret, a woman whose existence was known only to a handful of royal officials and guards. By 1227, after 25 years in that tower, Eleanor was no longer the vibrant princess who had been captured at Mirebeau. She was 43 years old, but looked ancient. Her hair was white, her back was bent from the low ceiling of her cell, and her mind had long since retreated into madness as a defense against the unbearable reality of her situation. When she finally died that year, it was almost a mercy. The official cause of death was listed as natural causes, but anyone who saw her emaciated body knew the truth. Eleanor of Brittany had been slowly murdered by her own family over the course of 25 years. Eleanor's story reminds us that even in the glittering world of medieval royalty, power came with a price that was often paid by the innocent. Her only crime was being born with a claim that threatened her uncle's rule, and for that, she paid with a quarter-century of her life. From the moment King John made his calculated decision at Mirebeau, Eleanor's fate was sealed, not by war or plague or accident, but by the cold political mathematics of royal succession. Her story stands as one of history's most chilling examples of how easily a human life could be erased, how completely a person could be made to disappear while still drawing breath. The tower at Corfe Castle still stands today, and if you visit it, you can see the room where Eleanor spent those 25 years. It's empty now, just stone and shadows, but somewhere in those walls lies the echo of a princess who was buried alive by her own family's ambition.